happens then?
I'm just trying to get in reply, I mean.
Okay.
It's really trash, so just don't mind me.
Okay. I guess we can look at it after you were sent. But first, let me. Okay, so we're gonna do the weighing drill. Actually, is William here today? Okay. We're gonna do a weighing drill though. So to quickly review weighing, there's three types of weighing: magnitude, time frame, and probability, right? Does someone remember what scope is?
Yeah, kind of.
What do
Like
you think
the
it is?
amount of people getting impacted by this.
Yeah. So it's like basically the number of people or like how wide your impact is. What about magnitude?
Wait, what? Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, well, what do you think magnitude is?
Um, like the topic or like the subtopic thing?
No, the subtopic right here.
Um, magnitude is how bad it is.
Magnitude is the
Oh,
number.
that's severity. It's the number of people, and then
Yeah,
severity
and
is how.
then severity is how bad, right? Exactly. So then, once again, the difference between scope and magnitude is that magnitude usually goes for the same impacts because it's hard to like say, oh, you have 10 million in poverty, but I have 5 million who die. Like, that's kind of hard to like weigh. But magnitude usually goes with the same impact. So you have 100 million dying, but I have like 10 million, right? And then scope is usually on different impacts, or it could be on the same impact, but it's just like, oh, you only push 100 people into poverty in America, but I push 100 across the world, which is more important for XYZ reasons. All right, so time frame. So cyclical time frame just means that it's really hard to get out of. So like for example, once people are in poverty, it's really hard for them to get out because your parents are poor, you can't get a good education, you're also in poverty, your children also won't get a good education, and it just goes on and on. So it's like intergenerational cyclical poverty. Does someone remember what reversibility is?
It means that it's like really hard to get out of, like not across generations, but like like poverty, it like can be solved, but like death cannot be
Yeah,
reversed.
exactly. So can like the impact be reversed, right? What about prerequisite?
Like for example, if someone had like pandemic and someone else had like recession or something, then the pandemic could say like, oh yeah, because like ours is a prerequisite to like um a recession, then like my impact is worse, perhaps.
Yeah, exactly, right? Or it's like we have to stop pandemics or else we'll never recover from this recession, right? Like it's pretty obvious if we never solve corona, like our economy is probably not gonna like open up again because everyone will get infected if we just go out without getting a vaccine or like wearing our masks, right? So then the prerequisite to the economy is probably solving coronavirus first. And then long term and short term, it's like pretty obvious, right? Like, oh, you should look at the short term impacts first because, like, if these people are in poverty right now and you say they'll like die in the future, well, they're gonna die right now if you like keep them in poverty, right? Or like long term, like, oh, they say some people get pushed into poverty in the short term, but in the long term, more people are being lifted out of poverty, so prefer the long term, right? Okay, probability. So there's clarity of link, which is like how well you extend something, or how well you've debated it, right? So like we talked about how in summary you have to extend your arguments, like the link chain and then the impact, if you want the judge to vote off of it in final focus, right? So that's where we have to get the clarity of link. So it's like how well did you extend the impact and also how well did you debate it? So if your opponents had like 5 responses against it, but you didn't address what your opponent said, clarity of link is probably pretty low. The inherent probability of something is also like just we kind of use our gut feeling for this, right? There's no like actual inherent probability that people measure out, but like the probability that I'm going to that like there's going to be an economic recession is much higher than the probability that there's going to be a nuclear war that causes extinction, right? Just because there's been so many recessions and there hasn't been like a bunch of nuclear wars at all. And then the debate probability is kind of like, okay, outside of the real world, right? It's just in the debate world. What is the probability? How well did you debate it? It's kind of like clarity of link, but it's more of the probability of it, not just like how well did you debate it. So it's like you conceded my argument, which means it's 100% probability, right? So even if the inherent probability of like nuclear war is really low, if you never responded to my argument, you're basically agreeing that it happens. So there's 100% like debate probability. So these are the ways to weigh.
Wait,
And yeah.
Are they allowed to refute your, or are they allowed to respond to, like, let's say your example of the nuclear thing impact? Are they allowed to respond to your nuclear impact after you say that, like, because you didn't respond, then that means that the probability is 100%?
Yeah, so generally, when you do this kind of weighing, it comes in the last speeches, right? Because obviously, if they're in like first rebuttal and like second rebuttal hasn't even happened, and there's like, yeah, you didn't refute it, so you concede it, right? Like, no, you have to let everyone get through their speeches. This usually happens in summary, and usually, if it's a lay judge, like if it's a parent, they don't know the rules, right? So like you can just respond. They don't think that they conceded it, basically, right? But if it's a tech judge, definitely by summary, if you point it out, it's like really late. It's way too late for them to respond. But maybe your judge is just a little bit like also doesn't care about the rules, right? It would be best to say like don't take a new argument in like second summary or like first summary, you know. So they can still respond, but it depends on the judge if the judge wants to accept this new response, right? Because technically your opponents could read like a new argument in second final focus and there's no other speeches, but you know, it's up to the judge. But obviously the judge is probably not going to like vote off of something that abusive. Okay, so we just reviewed this. So let's go on to the weighing drill. So Juliana, do you want to first read your yeah, the contention I sent you in the message.
Right, and just don't read the drill that we did like just now, because essentially, like, no, like, just I put like the pictures of my notes in the chat. Just don't read it because it doesn't make any sense.
Okay, that's okay. All right, so for the weighing drill, just once again, right, how it's gonna go is you're gonna read your case, I'm gonna read my case, and then we're gonna weigh, like compare, you know, which one is more important. It's gonna be really quick. So just go ahead and read your contention.
Okay. Wait, am I supposed to be, am I going to be doing anything off this later? Like, am I supposed to, like, make an argument out of this or something?
Yeah, you're gonna have to weigh it against my argument later.
Your argument?
Yeah.
Oh.
Don't worry, it's easy. I gave you like a really good contention.
Okay.
Yeah. So just go ahead and read it first, and then yeah.
SB developing countries. Price controls in the U.S. would negatively impact third world countries where American drugs are sold. Milken Institute reported that in 2011 that U.S. pharma companies supply 57% of global drugs. Right now, their global drug prices are low in developing countries to get this access out to rural areas. In fact, according to Health Affairs study of 29 countries, developing countries on average weigh 27% of the American price of drugs. Because the University of Pennsylvania describes that this is only because people in developing countries pay the cost of manufacturing the drug, and can do so because companies turn profits here, allowing them to pay for R&D need for these new drugs. The impact is lives. Stanford Law School 18 wrote that price controls will result in prices rising in third world countries to compensate for lowering revenues. In Europe, for instance, price controls have inflated the prices of drugs in developing countries. The European Federation 17 quantified that expenses for EU pharma imports in developing countries increased by 37%. At the same time, that EU prices lowered by 13%, showing that for every 1% decrease in price leads to 3% increases for leads to 3% increases in developing countries. Problematically, in the New York Times 19 finds that 20 million people in Africa have access to life-saving HIV drugs for only $100 per year. Drastically decreasing drug companies' profits in America will cause prices of HIV medication to skyrocket in Africa, forcing millions to lose access.
Okay, good job. So make sure you have a pen and a piece of paper because I'm going to read mine and you're going to need to weigh against it. So let me just pull up my case. Where did it go? What the hell? Oh, sorry, my Chrome is like breaking. What the heck are these pages? Okay. Give me 1 second to pull up my case. All right, is anyone not ready? Okay. And let my time begin now. Contention 2 is the private sector. The private sector isn't going to make pharmaceuticals affordable. The prices of drugs have been rising for the last couple of decades. The producers of these drugs continually claim that they're working on lowering drug prices. Pharma giant Merck recently pledged to avoid increasing the prices of some drugs and even to lower the prices of others. That assurance wasn't made last week when Pfizer, Novartis, Sanofi, and Roche of multiple drug companies offered similar pledges amid similar criticism. It was nearly 3 decades ago in 1990 when then CEO Roy Vagelos tried to calm political fury over high prescription costs. According to analysts who have watched the uncontainable rise in drug costs over the past few decades, these promises are far from new, and the pharmaceutical industry's promises to contain drug prices are a familiar and fleeting phenomenon. As been proved by history, price restraint vows only last as long as politically necessary for companies to make them. Recent pledges are unlikely to be any different, as Paul Ginsberg, director of Schaeffer Initiative for Health Policy, says that these things are always very temporary and that no one considers this significant. Prices have been only going up in the past decade. A 12-week hepatitis C treatment costs upwards of $95,000, 38% more than the average income of an American family. If the 3.5 million people that have hepatitis C in America can't afford treatment they need, what's the point of having a treatment at all? Not only will the consumers be unable to get the help they need, the producers are unable to turn a profit. Thus, price controls would save millions, and we affirm. Do you have questions on that contention?
Wait, the last sentence that you said producers won't be able to turn profit? You are actually muted, I think.
Oh, sorry. Someone was calling me for no reason. Basically, the contention is just that like pharmaceutical companies keep increasing the prices of their drugs, and then like hepatitis C patients can't afford it. That's all.
Oh, okay. Wait, how about the thing about producers then?
Producers. It's just that like if consumers can't buy the drugs, then producers also can't make profit because like if like you can't sell the drug, right? You're not gonna make money. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So now I'll give you 1 minute of prep to go and try and weigh against this case. So remember the weighing mechanisms: magnitude, time frame, and probability. So just try to weigh with, some of those. And yeah, 1 minute starting now. All right, your 1 minute is up, so please weigh against my contention.
Okay. In rich countries, at least it's still possible to buy these drugs. However, we win in magnitude because people in developing countries have even less money to buy these drugs in the first place. And also, as we said in our case, for every like 1% or something, like 3% increase, in there's a 3% for every 1% decrease in developed countries, it leads to a 3% increase in developing countries, which means that the impact is even more severe on on developing countries. And also, um, producers wouldn't do that. Wait, no, that's just a rebuttal. Okay, sorry, I don't have anything else.
Yeah, no, that's okay. I think you did the 1 to 3, like you mentioned the 1 to 3 ratio, which was like pretty good. You know, you're talking about how any 1% decrease in the like EU will lead to a 3% increase in the developing world, right? So I think you can really go off of magnitude there. Like, okay, you save one person in like the EU and then you kill like 3 people in the developing world, right? And then the second thing is my impact on my case is 3.5 million, whereas yours is 20 million, right? So I think on magnitude alone, if you just point out the numbers, that's another place you can weigh. And then on
Wait,
rich countries is like
5 million?
what?
You said 3.5 million?
Yeah, I said that.
Oh,
Yeah.
huh. Wait, and my case says how many million?
How do you not know your own case, buddy?
Oh,
20
it's 20
million.
million, right? Wait,
20.
what? Wait, what is the one for mine? Sorry.
It literally says 20 million are
Okay.
on HIV medication in Africa, right? Like it's pretty evident what your impact is.
Okay, and you said 3.5? Oh no. Okay, sorry.
Please be sure to understand your case and also your opponent's case. Okay. And then for the last one, you talk about how like rich countries are better off than like poor countries because you know like their economy's better or whatever. And you did say it's magnitude, but more specifically under magnitude, you have to be sure to say it's like severity because like generally when people just say magnitude, they think of the number magnitude and not like, you know, like severity as well. So because it's a severity argument because it's like even if some people in America are losing access and some people in like Africa are also losing access, like it's probably worse off for the people in developing countries because there's no like social welfare or like their economy is really bad, so it's really hard for them to find a job, right? Okay, yeah. So, I feel like this is gonna be hard for me to weigh, but yeah, okay. I'm gonna do this. Everyone ready? All right, let my time begin now. The first way you can vote for us is on probability because we tell you the probability of like us implementing price controls, decreasing like the prices of hepatitis B drugs is like basically 100%, right? You're implementing a government policy in the US limiting US companies' drug prices, which will lead to people being able to afford these drugs. But you don't really know the probability of like, oh, if one country in America, like if America put price controls that would suddenly lead to these companies losing a lot of money, which leads to a bunch of people in the developing world increasing their prices, which leads to like the developing world, you know, losing access to these drugs. Like the link chain is a lot longer on the developing world. So you should vote for us on probability because we would say there's always other reasons why, you know, companies might increase or decrease prices in the developing world, but you know that prices are expensive in the US right now, and the only way that you can stop it is through price controls. The reason why you're going to prefer probability over magnitude is because, like, if you do the analysis of, you know, probability times magnitude, right? I would say our probability is 100%, so we get like 3.5 million, but the probability of their impact materializing is like 1%. So 1% of 20 million is like nowhere near 3.5 million. But also the second way that you can vote for us is on a prerequisite because if these countries, if these companies aren't making money in the US because they're charging such high prices that nobody can afford them, then they're going to go bankrupt eventually. And insofar as my opponent tells you that the US pharma like gives 57% of global drugs, you always want to prioritize that these companies are making money in America by setting adequate prices over like, you know, whether or not these developing country people are buying these drugs in the first place. Yeah. Okay. Any questions? That was like a pretty sad wing. I would just say it's because our impacts are so similar, but mine's is like worse than yours.
I mean, the thing is, you make yours sound much more credible. So it like takes me forever to find like some very, very obvious flaw in it. And so inevitably I don't end up finding the flaw.
I think, yeah, so I think the way to respond to my wing is that like you should always prefer people in developing countries first because they're so much more disadvantaged than like the average American. So even if I only save one person in Africa, that would be better than 100 lives in America. So you can go like that because like yeah, that's kind of like we're verging into like framework territory, but it's just like telling the judge which group you should prefer to like save first, right? There's a lot of arguments on the circuit, which is like, you know, some team might run like a generic argument impacting to like 100 million Americans, and another team might run an impact, you know, maybe to only 10,000 African Americans in America, right? But you know, a lot of the framework is that like we should always prefer saving African American lives or like helping African Americans first because you know they've been oppressed for so long, or like you know these Americans they can get help like in other places. So whoever is helping the most African Americans is the are the people that matter, and like all other impacts don't matter, right? So I think you can do that kind of framing for the developing world. You could be like, oh, the developing world is like the most disadvantaged, like they have no social welfare, their economies are pretty bad. So anyone who impacts to developing world first should be the ones who like win the round. Yeah. Okay. Let me share my screen now. So next, I'm gonna be talking about extensions. Okay, so first we have to talk about defense and offense because I swear to God, I bet I feel like y'all would forget. So offense is things that can win you the round and they're reasons to vote for you, right? So if you're on the neg, harms of the resolution, things that are bad, right? In this case, price controls, reasons why price controls are bad. If you're on the F, benefits, reasons why price controls are good. And this consists of everything on your case and then all the turns on their case, right? So responses to their case do not count as offense unless they're turns, right? So basically, like if I say, oh, my opponent isn't winning their argument because price controls, like let's take Juliana and Mines, right? So let's say Juliana's, I read a D-Link, like, oh, the price of drugs in America has no correlation to the price of like drugs in developing countries, right? So there's no correlation between, you know, how they would ever impact each other. So I'm going to de-link Juliana's argument, right? That does not count as offense because that's not a reason to vote for me, right? Okay, it's like, okay, you're not doing the bad thing. Doesn't mean I'll reward you, right? So it's kind of the idea that like, you know, like your parents will like not reward you for not going out and stealing food, right? Like they will only reward you if you like do something good instead, right? So in this case, if I'm F, you know, just taking out my opponent's case isn't good enough to win me the round. I have to like explain why, you know, perhaps the thing on my opponent's case is good or why my case is really good, right? So if I did turn Juliana's argument and I was like, oh, decreasing like prices, like having more expensive prices in developing countries allows for like domestic firms to compete and, you know, spring up against these multinational firms, means in the long run there's more like domestic innovation so they don't have to rely on like imports of medicine on net. That's good. That's a turn because that's something good, right? But just like not doing the bad thing is not a reason to vote for you. And then defense is reasons why your opponent's arguments aren't true or diminished. So it's like all the rebuttals other than a turn, right? So delinks, non-uniques, impact mitigation, evidence, indicts, those are all defense. So does that make sense? Okay. All right, so we already did this last week, but I don't know if y'all remember. If y'all do, just hopefully you'll get it right then. Okay, so the first one, my opponents argue that they can solve climate change. However, they're actually making the problem worse because nuclear energy produces more carbon emissions per ton as compared to solar panels. So is this offense or is it defense?
I think that's offense, right?
Yes, exactly right. If you're making the problem even worse, that's offense, because if we can prevent my opponents from making something worse, that's a reason to vote for us. All right, second, my opponent says that they can save lives through preventing a nuclear war. However, a nuclear war would never happen because mutually assured destruction means that countries don't want to send nukes and kill each other because then everyone will die. Is this offense or defense?
Defense.
Defense.
Yes, exactly right. Because this isn't a okay, sure, you prevent the war, but it's not like you prevent all wars, right? Or you're like saving some lives. You're just saying my opponent's argument isn't true. All right, third, you should vote for us because when we implement price controls, drug prices will decrease and millions more Americans can afford them, saving lives.
Offense.
Yes, it's offense because you're obviously directly saving lives. This is like a case contention. All right, four, my opponents are lying, Judge. Their evidence doesn't even says what it says. Say what it says.
Defense.
Yes, it's defense, right? Because all you're doing is pointing out their evidence is fake. You're not actually, explaining why your side is good or why their side is worse. All right. So we talked about how summary is first extensions, then frontlining, which is like defending your contentions, and then weighing, right? So we already talked about weighing, and we kind of talked about extensions. So now we're going to talk more specifically about extensions. So what are extensions, right? Extensions is basically you restating your contentions or like your arguments on your opponent's case and telling your judge like what you want them to vote for, right? So you must extend offense and defense in summary, right? So you have to extend your arguments. You have to repeat the arguments that you made in your constructive speech, and you have to repeat the arguments you made in your rebuttal speech. Now, of course, you can't go for everything, which is why collapsing is important. And collapsing just means picking the key arguments, right? Like you spent 4 minutes reading your case and you spent 4 minutes reading rebuttals against their case. There's no way that in a 3-minute speech, you're going to go for everything you said in those 8 minutes, right? Which is why we're going to collapse and we need to not only like summarize what we're saying. So obviously you're not going to read your case word for word. You're going to summarize your case, but you're also going to pick a few key arguments to go for, like summarize the entire case just in a couple words. All right, so for an extension of offense on your case, so like extending your contention, the first thing you need to extend is uniqueness, the second is link, and the third is impact. So the uniqueness is basically what is the problem in the SQUO. SQUO just is short for status quo, which just means like right now. So what's the problem right now? Or like what is good about the status quo, right? Because the neg wants to defend what's happening right now. It's like, oh, we don't need to take any action because it's really good. The link is how you access your impact, right? So how the resolution allows you to access the impact, and then the impact is just, what happens. So in the case of our resolution, implementing price controls, the uniqueness is the pandemic has pushed, 150 million people into poverty. The link is passing price controls would allow those people in poverty to continue to buy medicine, because, obviously medicine is going to be cheaper with price controls. The impact is 120 million lives are saved, right? So pretty simple. If you're really running out of time, you don't really have to extend uniqueness. At the least, you need the link and the impact, right? So let's say the reason why you don't really need uniqueness is because just having the link and the impact is sometimes enough, right? Passing price controls would allow people in poverty to continue to buy medicine, so that saves 120 lives. A million lives, right? So you don't necessarily need the uniqueness, but if you do have time, it's always better to go for it. Yeah. Anyone have any questions on this extension? All right. Next, write extensions for the following contention. So, yeah, I'm gonna give y'all 5 minutes to try and write an extension. So don't like read, like when I say extension, don't read the case word for word, right? Just summarize it. You want to find the uniqueness, you want to find the link, and then you want to find the impact.
So
Yeah.
do you mean collapsing?
Sorry, what did you say?
So do you mean collapsing?
No, collapsing. This is not collapsing. Collapsing is when you have a lot of arguments, but you only go for a couple, right? This is one whole contention and you're trying to go for the whole contention, but you're just summarizing it, right? So like if we treated debate as like a library, you know, throughout the debate, you're gonna have like 20 books of arguments come up, but you're not gonna go for all 20 books. You're gonna go for like 3 books, and then you're gonna summarize the books, right? Because obviously you can't read the entire book. So if we treat each argument as a book, this is a book right here, and you're going to summarize the book. So you're gonna make it really short. So try to make this as short as you can. And the tip is to try and include card names. So like Prescription Justice 17 would be the card name, especially for flow judges, because that's how like people, you know, remember what your evidence says. And then explaining the warrant is also important if the links don't make sense. So like right here, I just wrote uniqueness, link, and impact.
Wait, can you repeat what you said before that because I got kicked out?
Yeah, that's okay. So basically, I just said you have to try to include card names for flow judges. Like Prescription Justice 17 would be the card name, right? Because flow judges usually like write down the card names, and that's how they help remember the argument. But you can't just say like, oh, extend Prescription Justice 17, extend Brookings 17, right? Like nobody will understand. You just attach the card name to the argument that you're trying to extend. So yeah, and then also try and extend the warrant, which is, so we have uniqueness, link, and impact. I didn't write warrant in here, but warrant comes with the link, right? So the link would be passing price controls would allow people to buy medicine, right? There's no warranting here. It's just price controls means people can buy medicine, but the warranting would be by decreasing the prices of drugs, right? I'll give you all 5 minutes to read this and write an extension. Oh yeah, make sure you're typing this out, because I'm just gonna ask y'all to paste it in the chat so we can make it go faster.
Do we like have to include every bit of evidence?
Oh no, you don't have to include every bit of evidence, right? You just need to sometimes the link doesn't have evidence because it doesn't need it, but you just have to find the evidence or the sentence that goes with link impact, the uniqueness link and the impact.
Okay. There isn't really a quote for like the link, is there?
Yeah, sometimes the link doesn't have an impact, but you know, the link you might not, it might be hard to find it, so you can always make your own link, like the sentence for your own link. Okay, but that is time, so for everyone who's finished, please put it in, and for everyone who hasn't, feel free to take another couple of seconds. Okay, so Juliana, is what you pasted in the chat your extension?
No, I meant to delete it because I was trying to go to another line and then it ended up just.
Yeah, okay, that's okay, that's okay. So just paste your extension once you're done with it. So yeah, what Juliana has right here in the beginning is a good example of uniqueness, right? Prescription Justice 17. Basically, 45 million Americans have lost access to drugs because, and drug prices have been increasing a lot. And I think the most important thing in an extension when you're writing it is to make it as short as possible. So we want word economy, which just means saying the most in the least amount of time, right? And it's really important because summary is really short. It's only 3 minutes. So if you can, try to make your uniqueness link and impact as short as you can make it.
Can you show your PowerPoint because I had to retype?
Oh yeah, sorry. Okay, I don't know why it's taking y'all so long. It should be pretty easy. Let me grab my chart. I'll be right back. Give me a second. Okay, so in the chat, drugs are life-saving, but they've increased by 6.3%. Yes. Yeah, Ethan, this is a really good one. I would just recommend trying to make it shorter. So you don't need to copy the exact quote from the evidence. You can paraphrase really hard, right? So throughout the round, what is important to note is that like a lot of people, what happens to their contentions is that they evolve over time, right? So like, sometimes when you write an essay, in the beginning, your thesis, like when you're drafting your thesis statement, it might be like, the first thesis statement. But as you write the essay, you're like, oh wait, my thesis statement has like evolved or it's gotten a deeper meaning or something, right? So that usually happens in debate. It's like, for example, right now, the prescription justice that I have right here, it says 45 million didn't fill or complete a prescription drug due to high prices, right? So your opponents might say, oh, judge, they only impact 45 million people, but our impact is like 200 million people, right? So what I can say is that, no, they miss the the nuance, which just means like the more detailed, the more complicated part of our contention. They miss the nuance of our contention, which is that prices of drugs are rising faster than wages. So in the future, only more and more people are going to be unable to afford these drugs. So our impact is actually exponential. It's bigger than 45 million, right? So while when I'm reading this contention, it might not seem evident to you, sometimes people extrapolate their contention into something really big. But yeah, you just make it shorter. So right here, I would just say like, not people with no drugs would just 100,000 deaths per year, right? I would probably just cut this part out and then just say 100,000 people die a year because they don't have drugs. Yeah. Okay, so let's see what I did. So this is the uniqueness. Prescription Justice 17 finds every year 45 million people skip taking medication because it's too expensive. Luckily, implementing price controls lower the prices of these medicine, which is why the FDA finds we could save 4 million lives, right? Super simple, super short. That's what we want. This tip, oh, I forgot to edit. I didn't even write it down. I don't know what this says, but yeah. So that was my extension, right? So anything you want the judge to vote for in final focus must be said in summary. And the next part we're going to talk about is defense extension, right? So your rebuttals against your opponent's case. So what you're going to do is first you need to signpost which argument you're going to talk about, right? Because your opponent might be running 3 different contentions, and you can't just be like, oh, you can't just be like, NCBI 17 finds that blah, 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 and you just like start explaining your argument, right? You have to say, oh, on my opponent's first contention, you can delink it because blah, 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 right? So you're going to first signpost on my opponent's first contention about like drugs. You're going to restate the card name because that's how most like judges keep track of your responses, right? Because we don't just read like 2 responses. Most people read like at least 20 responses in rebuttal, right? So it's like, on the top of my opponent's case on contention 1, extend my partner's response from, NCBI 17, and then you restate the argument that tells you that drug prices don't decrease innovation because it actually increases the market size, which keeps profits at the same level, right? So you're going to explain the rebuttal, and then you're going to try and label it, right? So you're going to be like, you have to explain the implication, right? So after you say this, so what, right? You can be like, so my opponent's argument is delinked, or like at the beginning you would say delink my opponent's argument because NCBI 17 says that it doesn't actually decrease profits, right? And the reason why you want to implicate it is like, there's a lot of responses and there's a lot of different types of responses. There's non-unique, there's impact mitigation, there's there's delinks, so you really have to make clear to the judge which kind of defense you're extending. And then the last thing is backlining, and we're kind of getting into more specific like terminology here, but basically what it means is to defend your rebuttal if they argue against it, right? So obviously if you we talk about frontlining, right, which is that you defend your own case from your opponents, right? So let's say your opponent's read 10 rebuttals, you're gonna be like, no, my opponent's first response is false because of blah, blah, blah. My opponent's 5th response, 10th response is wrong because of blah, 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 right? And that's frontlining. That's defending your own case. But then let's say it goes back to the person who read the rebuttal. Then they're going to backline their rebuttal. So basically, let's say the first rebuttal that let's say, okay, so let's say there's a neg team and there's an AF team. The neg team reads innovation, right? Price controls decrease profits, which decrease innovation. And then the AF team says, no, price controls increase market size because more people can afford it, which means profits stay the same. And then backlining would be, and then the neg would frontline, right? The neg would be like, no, that's false because empirics prove, which just means like historically when we implemented price controls, prices like XYZ company has gone out of business, right? And then this would be backlining. So AF would be defending their rebuttal, saying, no, my opponent's wrong. Prefer my evidence because it's more recent, whereas theirs is from like 19 years ago, right? So that would be backlining, right? Defending your rebuttal if your opponent argues against it. Because let's say your opponent responds to your argument and all you do is just repeat it, right? Obviously, the judge has already heard your opponent's response to your rebuttal. They're not going to really believe it if you don't defend your rebuttal again. So does that make sense?
Yeah.
Great. So basically, I can like give y'all an acronym. Okay, let me spell it out right here. This is what this tip button will be for. Okay. So how do you know what to say in summary, right? What should the order be? And this is on your case. So lift way, right? So L stands for link, I stands for impact. So first you're going to extend your case. F stands for frontline, right? So if I go like this is link, link, impact, frontline, then way, right? So basically, you extend the link of your argument, you extend the impact, and then you frontline it, right? So maybe your opponent said something, you're going to frontline it. And then you're going to weigh this argument. So this is on your case, right? You haven't gone to extending defense. When you're extending your own case, it goes link, impact, frontline, weigh, right? So you can find it as lift, weigh. Simple acronym. And then on their case, right, it's just really general. Next week we'll do a demonstration because we keep running out of time every time, but I'll do a demonstration of a defense extension. So I'll read a case, I'll read rebuttals, and then yeah, we'll go there next week. But there's not really